Here, if Becky Hill is not credible, it's not because she didn't see it, it's not because she doesn't remember it, it's because she's a liar.
Thank you so much for joining us here on WLTX Plus. For continuous coverage, I'm Erica Glover. Right now, we are focusing on the South Carolina Supreme Court because just a few hours ago, our justices, they heard arguments for the appeal of Alex Murdaugh's murder convictions. And we're going to be tapping in with Christy Calcagno for a live look in the field in just a moment. But for right now, we are diving into two key questions: whether or not the clerk of court, Becky Hill, may have improperly influenced jurors, and whether or not evidence tied to financial crimes should have been admitted during Alex Murdaugh's initial trial. Those are the two key questions. Right now, though, let's go ahead and listen to what both the defense and the prosecution had to say earlier this Wednesday morning.
This matter we're discussing this morning, a fair trial, a jury not poisoned by outside influences. I've never seen a factual pattern like this, where the clerk of court, sets out to influence the verdict, to get a guilty verdict for financial gain.
Right. Here, if Becky Hill is not credible, it's not because she didn't see it, it's not because she doesn't remember it, it's because she's a liar. Is that right?
I would say that ultimately she said she was not completely credible, and yes, sir.
So there's only one way that Becky Hill can be not credible, and that is that she is a liar.
I think that Justice Toll did not credit parts of her testimony as she looked at everything. Now, she didn't specifically find that she is a liar, but ultimately she didn't credit that testimony. But what I think is important is that neither Justice Toll nor the state relies on Becky Hill. What we rely on is what is most important, and that is the 11. The overwhelming majority of these jurors who sat there and looked Justice Toll in the eye, who judged their demeanor, who judged their credibility, and who ultimately were clear as a bell that there was no sort of improper influence on their verdict.
So giving you both sides from inside the courtroom just a few hours ago. Right now, though, outside, giving us a different perspective is our very own news anchor, Christy Calcagno, joining us live over at the State House where this trial took place. Now, Christy, you have been out there since 6:30 this morning, seeing who is coming, who is going. We know this is a very high-stakes process. Go ahead and walk us through your morning there.
Yeah, that's right, Erica. It has been a morning. Yeah, as you mentioned, we've been here since 6:30 in the morning, and we are definitely not the only ones. A lot of our other sister stations from across South Carolina and some national stations made the trek here over to the capital city to go ahead and get the glimpse of the Alex Murdaugh hearing on today. Now, when we arrived at 6:30 in the morning, there were already people who were lined up to get inside the Supreme Court. The reason why is because, well, it's a very limited courtroom. In fact, less than 100 people were able to get inside. So that line was eventually wrapped around the building. And normally before the sun came up, that's what we were seeing right before the doors opened at 8:30. Our News 19's Kiki Gushu was able to get inside, and she's going to have much more kind of breaking down the case coming up a little bit later on in the show. But I was outside really breaking down exactly what we were seeing minute by minute. And as the sun came up and as the doors opened, you saw everybody filing in. I would say within 10 to 15 minutes, those doors were closed because it was already packed. Who was it packed with, right? A lot of people are asking, so who was allowed to go in there? Well, in fact, anybody was allowed to go in there. But some key people that we were able to see was Joe McCullough, who we'll get to in just a little bit, who is a prominent South Carolina attorney. We also saw some University of South Carolina, Clemson, and Wofford students who were pre-law students who were taking the time and said that they wanted to be able to sit in during this historic moment. We also were able to talk to some people who waited, again, as I mentioned, so early in the morning because they have been following this case from the beginning. Some people I spoke to said that they have been in every single courtroom every single time if they could get a seat on in there. But let's go ahead and listen to Joe McCullough. Now, let me go ahead and break down who he is. Of course, he's a prominent South Carolina attorney, but he also represents the juror who's often publicly identified as the egg juror. Now, McCullough was inside the courtroom today listening to the arguments as well as the justices' questions. Here's what he had to say.
Because of our case law, very limited case law on jury tampering and the standards by which judges, trial judges, should evaluate that, and that's really a central issue here. So I think this case will be, in my view, decided on that issue, with this court clarifying how and what the standard is for jury tampering. The defense takes the position that once they produce credible evidence of tampering, that then the burden shifts to the prosecution to prove it didn't influence the jury. The judge who held the hearing on the new trial motion for jury tampering concluded that she would not grant a new trial on that basis. The defense contends she used the wrong standard. And this court seemed very interested and, if not concerned, that Ms. Crosby, the egg lady's affidavit, was considered by the court, but her testimony was not allowed. The stated reason being that she wasn't on the jury, but yet the alternate was allowed to testify. So the inconsistencies there, I think, have got the attention of this court.
Yeah, again, that was Joe McCullough there. Not only is he's also representing the egg juror who you just heard from there, and also was a very key component in the middle of this Supreme Court hearing earlier today. Now, this was all in reference to what you just heard in that soundbite from inside the courtroom, how their defense is arguing, saying that even a small comment can carry a lot of weight, again, referring to Becky Hill. But the state, of course, countering that with prior findings, crediting that most jurors who said that they were not influenced. But speaking to McCullough, he said that this is far from over. And I know that's what we're going to be hearing a lot today. So there was no decision that came out today. So right now, what we did able to capture is that as soon as the hearing was over, we all came out and we were hoping to be hearing from both the state as well as the defense. But Attorney General Alan Wilson did make the announcement that said he will not be doing any press conference, and he was ending the conversation, and he did leave. So we weren't able to get any reactions or any statements from them. But of course, we'll have a little bit later onto the law firm side with Dick Harpootlian coming up in a little bit. But that is pretty much what we have here right now. Looks like the media frenzy is calming down just a little bit right now, so we're just kind of get things rolling on in here as the sun is going to be setting in just a little bit. But coming up later on Friends at 5, we're going to have more of a breakdown, who I spoke to, what is happening, and kind of break down exactly the reactions of people both inside and outside the courtroom. Reporting live here at the South Carolina Supreme Court, I'm Christy Calcagno for News 19 WLTX.
All right, Christy, thank you so much for diving into those details. We do look forward to your extensive coverage coming up at 5 o'clock, like you said, on Friends at 5. Now, as this appeal moves forward, there are still some big questions about what this court is weighing and also what could happen next. And to help make sense of all of this, our morning team sitting down for a one-on-one interview with attorney Dane Phillips. And we do want to make it very clear he is not connected to Murdaugh in the case or today's hearing, but go ahead and have a listen.
The court has grave concerns as to the issues raised on appeal, specifically the two primary issues of the jury tampering through Becky Hill, as well as the financial crimes, the improper character evidence. But they also delved pretty deep into what they would say is improper expert opinion testimony, whether it was related to cell phone, digital forensic evidence, as well as firearm ballistics evidence. There was a pretty significant amount of time spent on those two issues that, for the most part, many people didn't believe was going to be given a ton of time for this oral argument. And so overall, I felt like the overall tone and attitude of the questions that the Alex Murdaugh's legal team is feeling very positive going, or at least leaving the South Carolina Supreme Court today, that they certainly are in a good position potentially to have this case reversed on appeal.
And we are not done hearing from Phillips, because if the South Carolina Supreme Court overturns Alex Murdaugh's murder conviction, the case could then be sent back for a new trial, which is why, yes, there are questions about where this could happen and then how a retrial, how that would unfold the entire process. Attorney Phillips is also weighing in on this. Have a listen.
And sends the case back, what we call remand it to the trial court. It's going to go back to the same county, Colleton County. Venue matters because that's where the crime occurred, that's where the proper jurisdiction is. The only way the venue would change is if the defense lawyers made a motion to change venue and a judge granted that motion.
Well, a lot of questions and a lot of answers. Even if the Supreme Court overturns the conviction, a retrial is not automatic. The South Carolina Attorney General's office could go ahead and decide whether to prosecute the case again. If it moves forward, the trial will start from scratch with both sides free to then change their strategy, their evidence, and also their witnesses. Legal experts say one of the biggest challenges would be finding an impartial jury in a case that has received extensive national media coverage. And we are certainly not done with this, okay? Today we are continuing to break down what happened this morning and what's next. Our coverage continues at 5 o'clock here on air and over on WLTX Plus, where you're watching right now. We're going to have attorneys ready to answer all of your questions, and they're going to be with us all night long, including during our 9 p.m. special right here on WLTX Plus. As always, though, thank you for joining you. We'll see you shortly.